Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
The auditorium smelled like plastic chairs and nervous sweat, that distinct mixture of polyester and parental tension, the kind that sticks to your skin even under the robe and tassel. I stood in line with the rest of my graduating class, each of us holding onto the fragile illusion that this was our moment, that all the hard nights and debt and crushed nerves were finally about to be worth something. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, and maybe that was pride or just leftover adrenaline from the night before. My name was going to be called soon, and I knew, just knew, that something was going to go wrong. Because whenever my father and I were in the same room, something always did. I spotted them 3 rows from the front, seated just a bit to the left of the podium. My mom in her Sunday best, holding a little bouquet, red-eyed and smiling through it. And next to her, stiff as an oak beam, sat my dad, Rick Wallace. Arms crossed, sunglasses still on indoors like some kind of ex-military discount version of a Secret Service agent. And then he said it. Loud enough for the 2 rows around him to hear, but not so loud the Chancellor would notice. We only came because your mother insisted. Just like that. No pride. No subtlety. No hesitation. As if those words were nothing more than breath leaving his throat. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just stared at the floor tiles, counted the scuffs like they were stars in a broken sky, and waited for the moment to pass. It always passes. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time, long before the bills and betrayals and silent dinners, when I actually thought my dad was some kind of hero. He used to mow lawns with me in the summer, let me sip beer foam when I was 11, told me stories about real men and earning your worth like he was passing down family gold. But when senior year came around and college applications started showing up in our mailbox like bills from a future I hadn't earned yet, the warmth began to rot from the inside out. It started small. Little digs during dinner. Hope you're not planning to go off to some soft-ass liberal arts school, he'd say between bites. You're not cut out for that kind of thing. Then came the more direct stuff. You think we're made of money? You think college grows on trees? And finally, the real kicker, the line that snapped the last thread between us. If you want a future, go build it yourself. We don't do handouts in this house. That was the night I packed my bag. 1 duffel, 2 pairs of jeans. A laptop I bought secondhand off Facebook Marketplace. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just walked out while they were asleep and didn't look back. I crashed at my friend Marcus's place. Well, more like the unfinished basement of his mom's rental. No insulation. The air tasted like mildew, and the shower upstairs screamed through the pipes every time someone flushed, but it was shelter. I worked a double shift the next day at Johnson's Auto Wash, and then picked up evening shifts at a fast food joint called Burger Blaster, where the only thing more questionable than the meat was the management. My feet ached constantly. I smelled like fryer oil, car wax, and burnt hope. But I kept going. Every paycheck got split, 70% into savings, 20 toward food, 10 for the prepaid phone plan. I didn't buy video games. I didn't go out drinking. I didn't even buy a mattress, just rolled a sleeping bag over a yoga mat and told myself it was temporary. No one from my family called. My mom sent a few texts early on, asking where I was. I lied. Said I was with a friend in another city, working a summer job. She sent heart emojis and stopped asking questions. I think she knew, deep down. She just didn't want to admit it out loud. By December, I'd managed to scrape together enough for my first tuition payment. I applied to the local community college, no dorms, no meal plans, no bullshit. Just class and work and the grind. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't think anyone cared enough to ask. I filed FAFSA on the library computer, begged a financial aid officer for late deadline consideration, and ate microwave burritos for weeks to cover the rest. And then, one night, during a lull between dinner rushes, I stepped out back for a smoke I didn't even want. The alley behind Burger Blaster smelled like warm grease and broken dreams, but for once, it was quiet. I wiped my hands on my apron, sat on a milk crate next to the dumpster, and opened the envelope that had been stuffed in my locker earlier that day. It was thicker than usual. The kind of envelope you only get when someone has something real to say. I tore it open, grease-stained fingers trembling. And there it was. An acceptance letter. I was in. First semester. General Studies. Nothing flashy, nothing fancy, but mine. Earned. No one paid for it. No one vouched for me. No one gave me a damn thing. I looked up at the stars peeking out through the smog and dirty city air and let out the slowest, longest breath I'd held in years. Alone. Sitting on plastic behind a grease pit in a fast food joint that barely paid minimum wage. And for the first time in forever, I felt something that looked a lot like pride. Then the back door slammed and my manager yelled, "Breaks over, Nate. We've got a lobby full of angry bastards." And just like that, I tucked the letter in my pocket and went back to flipping other people's food, my future sitting like a secret next to my chest. I didn't know it then, but that envelope would be the first weapon in the quietest war I was ever going to fight. A war not of guns or fists, but of silence, self-worth, and proof. I wasn't just going to earn my future. I was going to own it. And someday, I was going to make my father see every damn receipt. People talk about college like it's some golden ticket, like once you get in, the doors to your future swing open wide and opportunity starts falling into your lap like spare change from a slot machine. But nobody really talks about what it's like when you're alone in it, when there's no safety net, no family backup, no rich uncle, no fallback plan. Just the daily grind pressing your bones into the floor while you pretend to be excited about the future you're too exhausted to picture. My first semester didn't feel like a new chapter. It felt like punishment for dreaming too loud in a house built on silence. Classes started in late August. The kind of heat that sticks to your skin and makes your shirt glue to your back before you've even made it halfway across the cracked campus parking lot. I was taking 4 classes, mostly online because I couldn't afford to lose day shifts at work. 2 at the community college itself, and the rest through their online portal. I'd leave work at Burger Blaster around midnight, get to Marcus's basement by 1, scarf down something microwaved, and start my homework in the corner, sitting on a plastic folding chair with a borrowed laptop that shut down if you moved the power cord too much. I slept about 4 hours a night when I was lucky. Every morning started the same: instant coffee, reheated eggs, and a moment of quiet just long enough to remember how far I still had to go. And every morning, I would hear Rick's voice in my head, like an alarm clock I couldn't turn off. "We don't do handouts in this house." It looped in my skull on repeat, right alongside the hiss of the bus brakes and the smell of burnt hash browns from the diner next to the school. It wasn't motivation. It was fuel. The kind of thing that doesn't lift you up, but keeps you moving just because stopping would be worse. At some point in October, I started getting nosebleeds, random ones. In the shower, in class, even while taking someone's drive-through order. I was pulling 35-hour shifts every week. Wait, no, 45 hours. That's like 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't even know if the math adds up anymore. My brain was scrambled eggs by that point. I lived on caffeine, rage, and the kind of tunnel vision only desperation can sharpen. My sleep-deprived eyes looked like I'd been in a fist fight every night, and in a way, I had. Except the fists were bills, hours, expectations, and the kind of shame you carry when your dad thinks you're not worth a dime. One night, I came this close to quitting. I'd failed a quiz because I forgot to hit submit before the midnight deadline. My professor, some dude with a ponytail and a superiority complex, had already sent me a snarky email about time management and how not everyone is cut out for higher education. I remember just standing in the parking lot in the rain, soaked through, staring at my cracked phone screen, thinking maybe my dad was right. Maybe I wasn't built for this. Maybe I was soft. Then something weird happened. Next day in class, another professor, not the ponytail guy, but a quiet middle-aged woman named Dr. Karen Hensley, who taught my American Lit course, asked me to stay after. I thought I was about to get lectured again, maybe even dropped for falling behind. But instead, she handed me a cup of tea, actual tea, not some philosophical crap, and said, "You looked tired. I don't know your whole story, but I can see you're trying." That sentence, that exact sentence, it hit harder than any insult my dad ever threw. She gave me an extension on the midterm paper and told me to take 2 days to sleep, no strings attached. I didn't even know teachers could be like that. I went home, well, back to the basement, and slept 14 hours straight. Woke up with clearer thoughts and a little more air in my lungs than I'd had in months. I wrote that paper in one sitting and turned it in early. Got a B+. It felt like a damn Nobel Prize. From then on, I pushed harder, but smarter. I stopped pretending I was invincible. I started budgeting my time better, even if it meant cutting work hours and eating ramen 5 nights a week. I put up sticky notes above my desk with quotes, class reminders, and one sentence I'd scribbled in Sharpie like a dare to myself: make it cost him everything he didn't give you. Around late November, just before Thanksgiving, I saw her, my mom. I was sitting alone in a tiny cafe near campus, cheap coffee in a cracked mug, trying to read while blocking out the holiday music playing way too early. She walked in, clutching her purse like it might fly away if she didn't grip it tight, and for a second, I thought I was dreaming. She hadn't seen me yet. She looked thinner, more tired than I remembered. I stayed still, trying to decide if I should duck out or say something. She spotted me. Her eyes widened, then filled with tears before she even sat down. She didn't yell, didn't scold, just looked at me like she was seeing a ghost she missed too much to be mad at. She begged me to come home, said my dad wasn't the same since I left, said maybe we could talk, maybe we could fix things. But I knew the truth: some things don't break, they just show you who they really were all along. I told her I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I reached into my coat pocket and slid a little plastic-wrapped phone across the table. It was prepaid, loaded with minutes and texts, nothing fancy, but enough. "If you ever really need me," I said, "use this. Just don't tell him." She nodded, tears falling into her coffee, and said, "I won't." And with that, I left. Not out of hate. Not even anger anymore. Just survival. Some of us have to build peace by walking away from the battlefield, and sometimes the battlefield looks like a family dinner table. I stepped back into the cold that day and didn't feel the wind. I only felt the fire in my chest, the same one that kept me going when there was nothing left to burn but my own damn stubbornness. I wasn't finished yet. Not even close. The gown didn't quite fit right. It was just a little too short at the ankles and way too long in the sleeves, like it had been made for someone taller, broader, someone who hadn't spent the last 4 years grinding bone against ambition just to stay standing. It smelled faintly of starch and sweat, like 100 other desperate graduates had worn it before me, each of them hoping for their clean break from whatever past they were trying to bury beneath a diploma. My cap was crooked no matter how many times I adjusted it, and my tassel kept hitting me in the eye every time the wind caught it. Still, none of that mattered. I stood there in the side hallway of the auditorium, breathing shallow, hands clutched tight around the folder in my pocket, the one thing I had brought that wasn't a lie or a borrowed item or a second-hand compromise. My name was somewhere halfway down the program, buried between kids whose parents probably sent out catered invitations and bought them new cars as congratulations. I wasn't bitter, well, maybe just a little, but mostly I was too damn tired to feel anything but a weird, jittery pride. I'd made it here, on my own, through night shifts, dollar store notebooks, and the kind of self-doubt that eats away at your brain like termites in old wood. I had crawled through 4 years of that and still come out walking. Then I saw them. 3 rows from the stage, far enough to pretend they were part of the audience, but close enough to ruin the moment. My mom sat forward on the edge of her seat, hands folded like she was praying under her breath, probably afraid I'd trip on the steps or drop something or, God forbid, not smile when I took the diploma. And next to her, like a storm cloud dressed in stiff khakis and a bad attitude, was Rick. Arms folded across his chest like he'd rather be anywhere else, his jaw locked in that familiar disapproval he wore like cologne. He leaned over just as the dean was giving his welcome speech and said, in that voice that cut without raising in volume, "We only came because your mother insisted." Not whispered, not muttered, loud enough for at least 6 people around them to hear. A woman in the row ahead actually turned and gave him a look, the kind you only give to grown men who still act like bitter teenagers at family holidays. My mom's face tightened, her eyes darting up to the stage, avoiding mine. And me? I smiled. Not a wide smile. Not a happy one. The kind of smile you wear when you've been building something in the dark for years, waiting for the moment to finally take the shot. I didn't flinch. I didn't show anything at all. I just stood a little taller and waited my turn. They called name after name, applause echoing through the room like raindrops on a metal roof, some louder than others, depending on how many cousins and siblings had crammed themselves into the folding chairs. When they said mine, it was quiet. A few polite claps. My mom's hands moving faster than anyone else's. Rick didn't move. Not once. I walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, looked straight into the crowd without scanning for faces, and held the diploma like it was a sword. Walking back to my seat, all I could think about was the folder. The thick, heavy folder I'd been carrying for weeks now, tucked deep in my gown pocket like a secret weapon. Inside were 4 years' worth of receipts, invoices, and tuition breakdowns. Rent payments, book costs, bus passes, health clinic bills from the times I couldn't afford insurance. Annotated and labeled, every line item highlighted. Over $86,000 of survival, paid for with late nights, worn-out shoes, skipped meals, and the kind of stubborn resolve that made people like Rick think you were just being difficult. The ceremony dragged. Speeches from people who didn't know our names. Honor cords and mortarboard tosses. Eventually, they called the last name, and we were told to stand, officially graduates of a system designed to make most of us regret the price we paid for it. I didn't care about any of that. I had one thing left to do. As the crowd stood and cheered, as moms and dads rushed toward their kids with balloons and shaky video cameras, I moved toward mine with deliberate steps. Rick was already rising from his seat, probably ready to grunt something obligatory before finding an excuse to leave early. My mom's face lit up when she saw me, arms open wide, voice catching in her throat. But I didn't go to her first. I stopped right in front of Rick. The crowd thinned behind us, the buzz of celebration fading just enough for the quiet to settle in. "This is for you, Dad," I said, reaching into my pocket. He looked down at the folder I handed him, confused for a second like he expected a thank you card or maybe some sentimental photo from my childhood. He opened it, just enough to see the first page. And then the color drained from his face. He didn't say anything, not right away. Just stared down at the neatly printed sheet with tuition totals bolded in red ink, my name in the corner, and the simple note at the bottom in my handwriting. "Since you said you wouldn't pay for things I didn't earn, I figured you should at least see what I earned without you." He flipped the page. Another invoice. Another bill. Another piece of proof that I'd done it without him. For years of silence turned into evidence, laid out like a ledger of everything he refused to believe I could accomplish. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Eyes flicked up at mine. My mom stood between us now, lips parted in a gasp, hands shaking slightly. People nearby had started to notice. One guy in a suit gave us a sideways glance, probably thinking this was just some weird family dispute about dinner reservations. But I stood my ground. No yelling. No lectures. No dramatics. Just the facts, printed and bound. Rick looked down one last time at the folder, then back at me. And for the first time in my life, I saw it. Not anger. Not disappointment. Just silence. And that silence was louder than anything he'd ever said to me. He stood there holding it like it might explode in his hands, like the weight of that folder suddenly made the ground beneath him a little less stable, a little less certain, like gravity had turned traitor in the space between one heartbeat and the next. I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't offer a damn explanation. I wanted him to open it, to see every page, to really look at what I had carried without him, what I had built with nothing but my own 2 hands, second-hand textbooks, lukewarm coffee, and the kind of pride that doesn't come from being told you're good enough. It comes from deciding it for yourself when nobody else will. Rick's fingers trembled just slightly as he turned the first page, his eyes scanning slowly, stopping at the dollar amounts, pausing at the headers that read Semester 1, Tuition and Campus Bookstore Total, Fall. I had written it all out, every semester carefully organized, color-coded, with each item labeled, textbooks, lab fees, transportation. Even the out-of-pocket urgent care visit from the time I thought I cracked a rib lifting crates at the warehouse job I held between finals week and winter break. There were grocery store receipts with totals circled in red ink. There were printouts of rent receipts from the sketchy landlord who always made me pay cash. There was even a handwritten list of the shifts I worked during one 3-month stretch without a day off, each week showing 35 to 45 hours while juggling full-time classes. I didn't do it to guilt him. I did it to show him what he never asked about, to show him what he never wanted to know. He turned another page, then another, and then another. His mouth stayed shut, but his face changed. The usual hard line of his jaw loosened. His shoulders, always squared like he was still standing at attention, sagged just barely. He blinked once, then twice. And that silence that hung between us grew heavier with each passing second. Around us, the celebration kept pulsing, laughter, applause, camera flashes, the occasional whoop of a proud sibling or dad who had shown up for the right reasons. But in our little corner of the auditorium, the world had gone still. My mom didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes kept bouncing between me and him, flickering with shock, pride, fear, something like grief. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was the morning of what this moment could have been if things had been different. If he had been different. Rick closed the folder finally, not quickly, but carefully, like he didn't want to damage it. He held it against his chest for a second longer than he needed to, then let out a breath that didn't sound like relief. It sounded like surrender. He turned to walk away, didn't say a single word. No argument, no defense, not even his signature brand of sarcastic deflection. Just turned and took 2 steps through the crowd, the folder still tucked under his arm like a package he didn't remember ordering, but now had to carry. That's when I heard her. "Are you kidding me, Dad?" The voice came from behind him, sharp, loud, unmistakably Lily. My sister, 5 years younger, the one who always tried to stay out of the way, who'd spent the last few years tiptoeing around our family like the floor was full of landmines. She had stayed silent for so long, stuck between us, caught in the Cold War we never officially declared. But now she stepped forward, blonde ponytail bouncing, eyes narrowed, voice rising over the post-ceremony noise. "You're really just gonna walk away?" After that, Rick froze, back still turned, hands clenched at his sides now. "You've spent years talking down to him," she shouted, pointing right at me, her voice cracking with emotion, calling him lazy, saying he wouldn't amount to anything, and now you see all this proof, and you can't even say a single word? People started turning their heads. Nearby families went quiet. A little girl dropped her balloon string. I heard someone mutter, "Yikes." And I stood there, not moving, because this wasn't mine to fight. Not anymore. "Do you even get what you've missed?" Lily yelled, stepping closer to him. He put himself through college. Every class. Every dollar. While you sat on your damn throne judging him like you knew better. Rick finally turned. His face was tight, jaw clenched, that military discipline barely holding back whatever storm he wanted to unleash. But his voice, when it came, wasn't angry. It was low, almost calm, the kind of calm that only ever hides something ugly. "You think this makes you a man?" he said, eyes locked on mine now, his voice slicing through the thick air like a razor blade. "You think you've won?" And I smiled. Not because I thought I had one. Not because this was some kind of game or contest with a scoreboard. I smiled because finally, he asked a question I had an answer for. Because I didn't need to yell or defend or explain. Because I had already done the work, and the work spoke for itself. I looked at him, held that eye contact, and said nothing. Just smiled. Because silence can be louder than any shout. Because I wanted him to sit with the weight of it, the weight of not being needed, not being asked, not being part of the thing he never believed I could do. Around us, the air crackled. My mom's hand hovered over her mouth. Lily stood glaring at him like she might throw something. A few people in the crowd started clapping. Not for me, not really, more like for the moment. The justice of it, the symmetry, the truth laid bare in public for everyone to see. Rick didn't say anything else. He turned again, walked away slower this time, like the folder had suddenly gained weight. And as he disappeared into the crowd, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not peace, not victory, but clarity. And I knew right then that something between us had cracked so loud the echo might never stop. It had been 3 weeks since I walked across that stage and handed my father the folder that shut him up harder than any argument ever could, and in that time, the silence hadn't just continued, it had deepened. No calls, no emails, not even a vague text with a passive-aggressive one-liner like he used to send whenever he wanted to remind me he was still alive, but too proud to say anything real. My mom sent a couple messages here and there, usually neutral, emotionless check-ins like, "Did you eat today?" or "He's been quiet." As if she were talking about the weather instead of the gaping wound sitting at the center of our family like a dinner table no one dared to approach anymore. I didn't respond to most of them, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know what to say anymore. What do you say to someone who watched you drown for 4 years and only now wants to ask how deep the water was? What do you say when every apology you ever needed is years overdue and delivered in half-empty glances instead of actual words? The days bled together quickly after graduation. I was working full-time now, an entry-level job at a tech company downtown. Nothing glamorous, but stable, with a desk and a badge and a cheap chair that squeaked every time I leaned back too far. My coworkers were mostly nice enough, mostly older, mostly the kind of people who'd already made peace with lives they hadn't dreamed of but had settled into anyway. I answered emails, organized documents, tried to understand how a spreadsheet could somehow ruin your whole afternoon, and went home at 5:30 sharp every evening to a studio apartment that still smelled like fresh paint and unresolved ambition. There were good moments, of course. Moments where I'd catch my reflection in the train window and think, "Damn, you really did it." Moments where I'd open my fridge and see food I bought with money I actually earned without skipping a bill or sacrificing a textbook. I'd sit on the little fold-up futon and stare at the ceiling with that same stubborn grin I'd worn on graduation day. But the bitterness, it didn't leave. It just got smarter, more subtle. It stopped screaming and started whispering. Some nights I'd lie awake wondering if maybe I went too far. If maybe handing him that folder in front of everyone wasn't just a calculated victory, but also a line I couldn't walk back from. There were parts of me that still wanted him to call, to yell, to say something, anything. Because even rage is a form of engagement. But instead, all I got was silence. Then, one late Thursday afternoon, I pulled into a gas station just off the freeway, the kind of place that sells old candy and hot dogs that have been rotating under heat lamps since Reagan was president. I was tired. I'd stayed late at work finishing a stupid report, and my brain felt like a soggy sponge, soaking up fluorescent light and coffee that tasted like regret. I grabbed a bottle of water, paid in cash, stepped back out into the warm, early summer haze, and froze. There he was. Rick. Filling up the old truck he used to baby like it was a living thing, the same blue F-150 with the missing passenger side mirror and the dented fender from some camping trip we took when I was 9. He hadn't changed much, same buzzed haircut, Same faded flannel shirt. Same posture, like he was still waiting for someone to bark orders at him. He hadn't seen me yet, or maybe he had, and just wasn't sure what to do with it. Then our eyes met. We locked eyes for just a second, maybe two. The kind of moment where the world quiets down and something heavy passes between you, unspoken and unfinished, like a sentence you never got to complete. I expected something, maybe a scowl, maybe a glance away, maybe even the middle finger if he was feeling especially petty. But instead, he just gave the slightest nod. Not a greeting, not an apology. Just a nod, like two strangers who once shared a story too long to explain now. I didn't move. I didn't nod back. I watched as he screwed the gas cap back on, climbed into the driver's seat, and drove off without a word, leaving behind the faint smell of gasoline and the noise of something irreversibly broken. That night, I sat in the corner booth of a little diner near my apartment. The kind with torn red leather seats, laminated menus that hadn't changed in 20 years, and a waitress who called everyone Han, whether you looked 20 or 70. I had just gotten my first full paycheck. Real money, taxed and direct deposited, with my name on the stub and everything. I ordered pancakes and bacon at 9 at night just because I could, because no one could tell me not to anymore, because freedom sometimes tastes like syrup and cold coffee. As I was finishing, the waitress handed me a small envelope. "This came with your name on it, Han," she said with a shrug. "Guy dropped it off an hour ago, said you might be coming in tonight." I opened it slowly, my gut already in a knot before I even saw what was inside. It was a receipt. Not just any receipt. It was for a backpack, blue, nylon, age 6, the kind you buy for a kid's first day of school. And attached to it was a note, scribbled in messy, slanted handwriting I'd know anywhere. I didn't know how to show it. That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just that. I sat there a long time, the receipt in one hand, my check in the other, the empty plate in front of me like a metaphor I didn't ask for but couldn't ignore. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I didn't know what the hell to feel, honestly. Because that one line, that stupid, late, too small line, rattled something inside me. Maybe he had tried, in his own broken way. Maybe love doesn't always look like support or warmth or praise. Maybe sometimes it looks like a backpack and a receipt kept for 2 decades in a box in the garage, unopened until it was too damn late to matter. Or maybe it was just guilt. I still don't know. And maybe I never will. All I know is, as I left that diner and stepped into the humid night, that question followed me down the sidewalk like a shadow. Did I win? Or did we both just lose different versions of the same fight?